President Biden says he is ordering U.S. intelligence agencies to increase their efforts to investigate the origins of COVID-19. The move follows reporting from earlier this week, which raised new questions about the possibility that the virus originated in a Chinese lab. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang has the latest.
President Biden tonight is pushing the intelligence community to redouble their efforts with a 90-day review to find out where COVID-19 came from, an infected animal or a lab accident in Wuhan. In a carefully worded statement, Mr. Biden said top officials do not believe there is sufficient information to assess one to be more likely than the other.
The intelligence community does not know exactly where, when, or how COVID-19 virus was transmitted initially.
The administration blames the uncertainty on China's refusal to provide critical information and data collected during the early stages of the pandemic. Today, top U.S. medical officials testified that COVID-19 probably emerged from an animal, but said drawing a definitive conclusion requires more investigation.
That it is most likely that this is a virus that arose naturally, but we cannot exclude the possibility of some kind of a lab accident.
In March, the World Health Organization concluded that it is extremely unlikely COVID-19 was introduced in a lab, but the administration has questioned the credibility of that finding because Beijing has refused to let inspectors into the Wuhan lab, where 3 researchers reportedly got so sick with COVID-like symptoms they had to be hospitalized in November 2019, a month before China disclosed any cases. Now the White House is urging the WHO to conduct another investigation.
We need a completely transparent process from China. We need the WHO to assist in that matter. We don't feel like we have that now.
And Weijia Jiang joins me now from the White House. Weijia, the president says that he's asking the intelligence community to, quote, redouble their efforts to investigate the origins of COVID-19. But what specifically does that entail?
Well, they are really hoping to get more data and information from China. That is their priority number one, and they have blamed Beijing for failing to do that so far and hindering investigations, refusing to allow inspectors on the ground. And so today, the principal deputy press secretary here at the White House held a briefing, and I did press her about what redoubling means, and that's exactly what she said, that their focus right now is just trying to get more information, trying to use more resources to do that. Of course, it's all dependent on how cooperative China wants to be, and she really didn't get into specifics about what kind of pressure or how to apply that pressure to force China to, cough up the information that they're looking for, needed to piece together this really critical puzzle, not only about COVID-19, but to understand pandemics in the future. And so there will be a 90-day review, and the White House has said that after that they will disclose any information that they find and talk about next steps in getting that information.
And as you mentioned, Weijia, the White House is criticizing China's lack of transparency, particularly during prior investigations. But is there anything that the administration feels that it can do to pressure China to cooperate this time? And why are they doing this right now?
I think this was a question that maybe more than 5 of us tried to ask during today's briefing because the timing is questionable, given that the president had this intelligence community assessment last month, given the fact that it comes on the heels of other reports that there were 3 researchers from the Wuhan lab who had to be hospitalized in November 19th, which is a month before China disclosed any cases of COVID-19. And so it still remains a question about, why now? Why is the president, why does the president think that China will change its mind? And, I think the fact that it's not just the U.S., it's the entire world that is really pressuring China for more answers is one reason that they think perhaps there could be a shift. But, I don't think they're able to answer so far the incentive for Beijing Beijing to disclose any information that they may or may not be withholding. And at this point, it's hard to tell, as some medical experts have pointed out, what information even exists when you're talking about, early specimens and lab reports from the first months of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift gears and talk about Republican senators who are expected to unveil their new counteroffer to President Biden's slimmed-down infrastructure proposal. That's supposed to happen on Thursday. So what might their plan look like? And do you know, what are some of the remaining sticking points between GOP lawmakers and the White House? Is there an expectation that this will get sorted out through these conversations?
Well, the public-facing message is that they are very optimistic, and we know that they are getting closer to meeting in the middle. The White House started at $2.3 trillion. They've come down to $1.7, and we know that the Republicans first offered $568 billion as a counteroffer, but tomorrow they are expected to present something that is around $1 trillion, which is what President Biden has said would be, the lowest bar he would be willing to engage when it comes to an infrastructure plan. And so it looks like they are making substantial progress, and these figures are really important because at the end of the day, it's all about the number crunching. But at the same time, Republicans have said it should be the content that is driving the numbers, and there is still a lot of disagreement over that substance, over how you really define infrastructure. As we've been talking about for weeks now, the White House wants to include measures that are not traditional when you're thinking about infrastructure, roads, bridges, things like that. They want to weave in broadband. They had wanted to add more money for things related to climate change. And so, it depends on, how much the Republicans are willing to accept this new definition. And another major problem, Lana, is how this will be paid for. When you're talking especially about numbers this big, there's not consensus about, who is going to foot the bill. So that's something else that they have to work out.
Definitely a sticking point. Before I let you go, the Manhattan District Attorney has convened a special grand jury as part of its investigation into former President Trump and the Trump Organization. Help us understand how significant this is.
This is incredibly significant because it is a pretty critical tool that the Manhattan DA is going to use to try to decide whether to indict the former president and other officials related to the Trump Organization. Of course, we know that he's been looking into this for several years now and looking into the former president's tax records as one component to really try to understand whether there are any pieces related to his personal portfolio and the Trump Organization that might be fraudulent, and what that might have done to impact some of his decision-making while he was in office. And so the fact that it's gotten to this point to convene a grand jury indicates that he believes he has significant evidence that he thinks a jury could look at and say, they believe that somebody, we don't know if it's necessarily Mr. Trump himself, is guilty of something. And so for it to get to this level speaks volumes. I can tell you, though, that Mr. Trump has issued his own statement, sort of brushing this off as expected and saying that this is just a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in history.
All right, Weijia, thank you.
Sure.